Elon Musk stuns the host into silence. His answer shocks the entire nation. That day, the studio lights suddenly dimmed and then flashed like a bolt of lightning, highlighting the two figures facing each other. On one side was Elon Musk, a man whom no advanced technology could challenge. Opposite him was Emily Roberts, a journalist famous for her relentless style and sharp questioning. Just when it seemed that Musk was in a difficult position, he unexpectedly turned the situation around, leaving everyone in shock. The entire studio fell silent as if a storm was about to break. The host froze as if hypnotized, while the audience held their breath, waiting for his next words. Musk not only defended his viewpoint but also opened a new door, forcing everyone to reconsider what they had believed. The biggest question was, what did he say that turned an impossible situation into an explosive moment? And what valuable lesson was hidden in this confrontation? The studio lit up with cold green lights, the cameras casting diagonal beams on the stage, capturing even the smallest movements of the figures. The atmosphere in the room grew heavier, making everyone feel the heat of the ongoing battle. This was not an ordinary conversation about technology or scientific advancements. No, this was a battle of wits where everyone knew it was not just about theories but reality. At the center of the stage sat Elon Musk, not just a great inventor but a symbol of relentless change. He sat in his chair, eyes locked onto Emily, his gaze cold but filled with absolute confidence. No one had ever been able to shake Musk, no matter how much the world changed. On the other side was Emily Roberts, her face cold and her eyes sharp as a knife. She was someone who never hesitated when faced with tough questions, always finding ways to force people to answer truthfully, leaving no room for evasion. The screen behind them suddenly lit up with the words, "Unveiling the truth," a reminder that tonight, nothing would remain the same. The entire room seemed to hold its breath in this tense atmosphere. Some truth was about to be revealed. Behind the scenes, the production team worked at a frantic pace, eyes fixed on every frame, every shot. The producer shouted into the headset, demanding perfection. The countdown echoed. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and as the lights flashed back on, the studio instantly became a different world. Emily Roberts, holding a thick stack of documents, looked at Musk with eyes that seemed to strip away every layer of pretense. She didn't smile but spoke coldly, preparing to strike with her questions. "Elon, thank you for being here today." Musk tilted his head slightly and offered a subtle smile, as if he was fully prepared for everything that was about to happen. There was no panic, no sign of hesitation. He was in battle, but with the calm of someone accustomed to the harshest challenges. The entire room now felt like an arrow ready to be released, and no one dared to blink. Emily Roberts leaned forward, her gaze unwavering and piercing. She had no time for small talk or pointless pleasantries. From this moment on, she was determined to force Musk to face the truth. "We cannot deny your talent, Elon," she began, her voice calm, but her eyes like lightning. "But praise must feel foreign to you now. People no longer see you as a bold leader. Instead, you have become the embodiment of a reckless man, someone who does not hesitate to break all boundaries just to satisfy his own ego." She paused, as if giving her words a chance to sink deep into the mind of the person in front of her. "You have made a series of controversial decisions, like firing thousands of Twitter employees. You openly criticize celebrities and drag the entire online community into unnecessary conflicts. Some people are beginning to believe that you are exploiting your power to manipulate public opinion for personal gain." She did not take her eyes off Musk, and her words hung in the air. "Do you have any response?" The entire room fell silent. All eyes were on Musk, waiting for him to explain or justify himself. But no, Musk did not rush to answer. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, thought for a moment, and then spoke, unhurriedly. "Emily, I want to know one thing." His voice was deep but challenging. "The people you mention, who exactly is criticizing me? Who are you talking about?" Before anyone could react, the atmosphere in the room shifted. Emily was silent for a moment, while the audience murmured. Musk was not defending himself, he was turning the question back on her. Emily tried to maintain her composure, but inside, she knew she had to answer more intelligently. "I am talking about those who once praised you, but now they are questioning the true motives behind your actions." Musk simply nodded, his eyes unchanged. still calm as if he had anticipated this response. So, the public, right? Musk did not seem surprised. Or perhaps, what they have been taught to believe. Another wave of murmurs rippled through the room. Emily realized that Musk was not just rejecting her criticism but steering the conversation in an unexpected direction. Emily quickly straightened her posture. Trying to regain control, she smiled, but there was a hint of stiffness in it. What are you suggesting? That some secret forces are manipulating the public into thinking in ways you disagree with? She asked. Her voice laced with sarcasm. But Musk remained firm, unwavering. He leaned back slightly, his eyes full of confidence. I am not implying anything, he replied, his tone calm, steady. I just believe that we all need to ask ourselves difficult questions. And that is something I think we should all be doing. A wave of silence swept across the room. It was not the silence of tension, but the silence of realization, where all eyes turned to her. Emily Roberts understood that this was not the time for ordinary questions. For simple tests, she needed a different strategy, stronger, more decisive. With a subtle motion, she flipped to a new page in the file before her, her eyes flashing, and the next question was ready. So, can you explain the changes you made after taking over Twitter? She asked. Her voice steady but sharp. Some see it as a necessary step forward. But many view you as the one who painted a picture of chaos by making decisions that could overturn long-standing norms. Twitter used to be a platform with clear moderation guidelines. Now, it has become a place where anyone can speak freely without fear of control. She paused slightly, her sharp gaze locked onto Musk. So, do you think you bear responsibility for this chaos? Musk was not intimidated. He looked straight into her eyes. Unwavering, his gaze was resolute, without a hint of hesitation. He exhaled slowly, then leaned forward, his voice steady, neither fast nor slow, but filled with certainty. I believe that freedom of speech is a fundamental right for everyone. Musk began, his tone calm but weighty. People need the right to decide for themselves what is true, rather than simply accepting a version of the truth that is imposed on them. I don't want Twitter to become a tool for unreasonable censorship. It is the power over truth that creates oppression. He paused for a moment, letting his words resonate in the air. History has taught us that when a small group controls the truth, it ceases to be the truth. It becomes a tool of power. In the room, a few members of the audience nodded slightly, agreeing with his words, but many others sat in silence, contemplating, unable to accept his viewpoint so easily. Emily realized that Musk was not just answering her question. He was posing a challenge to the very foundations that society relied upon. His words did not only plant doubt in her mind but forced her to confront a much bigger issue. She could not let him take control of this conversation. Sitting up straighter, she gripped the table tightly, her gaze sharper than ever. This was no longer an ordinary interview. This was a battle of power. And Emily had no intention of losing. She quickly adjusted her posture, took a deep breath, and firmly delivered her next question, one filled with challenge. So, you truly see yourself as a defender of free speech, don't you? Emily asked, her voice no longer doubtful but a direct challenge. You claim to protect free speech. Yet you decide who gets to speak and who doesn't on your platform. You reform censorship policies, yet you fire thousands of employees. So, tell me, are you really any different from those you criticize? The room fell into a silence so deep that the whispers of the wind outside could be heard. Every pair of eyes was locked onto Elon Musk, as if the audience was waiting for a remarkable response from him. Emily's sharp words had intensified the tension, but Musk simply sat there, his expression calm, his gaze unchanged, showing no signs of unease. We are standing at a crossroads, Emily, he said, his voice low but carrying an invisible weight. You are right about one thing. I do have control over the platforms I own. But if you think that means I am doing the same thing others have done, then perhaps you are mistaken. He was not rushed. Every word was spoken carefully, as if he was opening a new dimension for everyone to understand. To me, control is not about manipulating information, it's about allowing freedom of choice. He emphasized the word freedom clearly, making everyone pause to reflect. A quiet sigh was heard from the corner of the room. The audience stirred slightly, but Musk remained unfazed. He continued, his voice still calm but carrying an undeniable force. People should be able to decide for themselves what they want to hear. And if you believe that only one perspective is correct, then you should ask yourself, who really has the right to decide what is right and what is wrong? The entire room seemed to fall into sudden stillness. Emily found her eyes locked onto Musk. Yet she could not deny that he had put her in a difficult position. But she was not someone who would back down easily. She quickly flipped through her notes, preparing for her next attack. Then, "Are you not going to take responsibility?" Emily asked, each word carefully measured. "Since you took over Twitter, extremist organizations and groups spreading misinformation have had the opportunity to thrive. Are you aware of that? Or do you continue to uphold free speech without considering the consequences?" Her question was as sharp as a blade. And for a moment, the entire room held its breath, waiting for Musk's response. Musk did not rush to answer. Instead, he took a deep breath, his composure as calm as a still, clear stream. Finally, he spoke, his words filled with challenge yet maintaining a light tone. "Do you think freedom of expression is a threat?" "Emily?" He looked straight into her eyes, his gaze filled with determination. "History has proven that every truth needs time to be accepted. I do not deny the existence of misinformation. But the real question is, who gets to decide what the truth is? A self-proclaimed group of experts? A powerful government entity? Or an organization with its own agenda?" His questions cut into the heart of the matter like sharp knives, forcing everyone to reconsider the values they had always taken for granted. Musk leaned forward, his eyes turning colder, as if he were posing a challenge to everyone in the room. If those who abuse power are allowed to decide the truth, can they really make fair decisions for everyone? Emily Roberts felt the tension spreading through the room. Every passing second was like the pounding of a heartbeat, strong and relentless. She had prepared for the most crucial question, the one that, if she didn't ask now, would cost her control over the entire conversation. She turned to Elon Musk, her gaze sharp and full of challenge. "You speak about fighting for the freedom of information." She emphasized each word, each sentence, as if every phrase was a decisive blow. "But have you ever questioned whether you are using that power to shape people's thoughts?" Her voice was unwavering. "You hold immense influence. But how can we be sure that you are not using that power to push a narrative that only serves your own interests?" The air in the room thickened. Everyone fell silent, holding their breath, waiting for Musk's response. He looked at Emily, not in a hurry, not flustered, but there was an unusual flicker in his eyes. He smiled, lightly, as if her words were not a challenge but merely a question unworthy of concern. "I do not ask anyone to believe me," he said, his voice calm but carrying undeniable weight. "I only ask that people think for themselves and find their own answers." He looked directly into the cameras, as if speaking to millions watching from afar. "If someone disagrees, present an argument, but do not stay silent. Do not let anyone steal your ability to think independently." Emily could feel the power slipping away from her. Musk was steering the conversation in his own way. But she couldn't let things end like this. Taking a deep breath, she knew this was the defining moment. She would not let him walk away so easily. "You paint a dark world, Elon," she continued, her voice growing stronger. "But if everything is as bad as you describe, if power is being manipulated as you warn, then what is left to hope for? What can we still save?" Her question landed like a heavy strike, silencing the room. The people inside stopped breathing, and even Musk had to pause for a moment. Every gaze locked onto him, all waiting for his next move. Would Elon Musk remain composed? Or would his words betray even the slightest hesitation? Emily had asked all the questions she had, but Musk remained calm and unshaken. He countered with composure, as if he was not only defending his stance but also turning the tables, making everyone reconsider their own thoughts. But Emily couldn't let him walk away with an easy victory. She felt the necessity of posing one final question, a question that might force him to confront himself. Taking a deep breath, she set her pen down on the table and looked straight at him. "You've spoken a lot about power and the manipulation of information. But have you ever asked yourself, what if, one day, you become the very thing you've always warned against?" Her question wasn't just a challenge, it was a blow to the very theory Musk had built. At that moment, the atmosphere in the room shifted again. Everyone fell silent, sensing the tension thickening in the air. Those sitting close to each other whispered, while Musk and Emily locked eyes without wavering. Every person in the room knew that this was the question that could change everything. Musk remained silent, but his eyes no longer held the same unwavering calm as before. Emily's question had forced him to reconsider his own words. And now, everyone in the room knew. This was the defining moment of the conversation. Emily Roberts was not just asking a question, she was challenging Elon Musk, making the entire room hold its breath. The studio lights shone brightly, and every word she spoke rang out with undeniable force. She looked directly into Musk's eyes. Fearless, you've warned about the dangers of power falling into the hands of a select few. But you, Elon, hold so much of it yourself. You are not just an ordinary businessman. You don't just own a company, you run a conglomerate that has the power to reshape the economy, redefine our vision of the future, even influence how we live and think. She did not miss a single detail. Tesla has reshaped the transportation industry. SpaceX is pushing humanity beyond Earth. Starlink controls the global internet infrastructure. And then there's X, the place where every conversation, every debate, takes place. She let those words linger in the air, making sure no one in the room could look away from him. And then, as if testing him, she pressed on, her voice unwavering. Have you ever stopped to ask yourself, are you becoming exactly what you've been warning against? A person who holds too much power, beyond anyone's control, and if one day you change, if you become the very thing you claim to fight against, who will be there to stop you? The air in the room grew heavier, thick with anticipation. Everyone in the studio was waiting for Musk's reaction. He sat still, silent, but his eyes revealed deep contemplation. There was no laughter, no dismissive remark, only a sharp, unreadable gaze. Everyone remained silent, as if unable to believe what had just been said. Time seemed to freeze in a long moment before Musk slowly shrugged, looking at Emily with a gaze deeper than ever. Finally, he spoke, but his voice no longer carried its usual confidence. It was soft, yet filled with great contemplation. That is the question I ask myself every day, Emily, Musk said, his voice ringing out not as a justification, but as a serious admission. I am not perfect, and I don't have all the answers. But there is one thing I know for sure. The boundary between a protector of truth and an abuser of power is not defined by how much power they have, but by whether they allow others to challenge and question them. He took a deep breath before continuing, his tone calm but full of implication. The day I stop listening to questions, when I use my power to silence those who disagree with me, that will be the day I become what I once condemned. The entire room was enveloped in a heavy silence. Musk's words were not just an answer, but a serious warning, to himself and to everyone listening. Emily, the woman who had led this interview, said nothing. She sat there, as if unable to believe what she had just heard. Musk's response was not a justification, it was an awakening. A reminder that power can shift and transform at any moment. And as the lights in the room dimmed slightly, only one lingering question remained in the air, one that no one could answer immediately. This conversation was no longer just about Musk. It had evolved into a profound dialogue about the nature of power and control. Everyone in the room understood that this was only the beginning of a much larger debate. Emily looked at Musk, her eyes deep and unwavering. But what will you do when you become the very thing you are warning us about? She asked. Her question hanging in the air, not as a challenge, but as a search for a deeper truth that neither of them had fully grasped. The lights in the room seemed to dim strangely, making the atmosphere eerily still. Every audience member sat up straight, their eyes wide, their scattered gazes turning into an unspoken anticipation. A few people began whispering to each other, but those murmurs could not erase the heavy silence weighing over the room. Everything felt frozen in place, as if only Emily Roberts' words could shatter this stillness. She stood there, staring directly at Musk, each word she spoke like a stone cast into the still waters of the interview. You always warned us about the power of unchecked authority, about the dangers when a small group can decide the fate of the world. But look at yourself, Elon, she said, her voice unwavering. You are not just an ordinary investor. You don't just own companies, you own empires capable of changing the lives of millions. Tesla reshapes transportation. SpaceX opens the future for humanity. Starlink provides internet access to every corner of the Earth. And X, the world's leading digital communication platform. Emily paused for a moment, then continued, her gaze as sharp as a razor. Have you ever wondered if you are becoming the very thing you so often denounce? When your power grows beyond control, when every decision you make affects millions of people, who will hold you accountable? And if one day, you become a version of what you once opposed, who will stop you? The room seemed to fall into a suffocating silence. Every eye was fixed on Musk. He did not appear flustered, did not smile as he usually did, only a thick silence remained. As if the question was too immense to answer immediately. Then slowly, Musk leaned back in his chair, placing his hands on the table, his fingers interlaced in deep contemplation. "Emily," he said, his voice no longer sharp but rather subdued. "That is a question I have asked myself thousands of times." He lifted his head, his gaze seeming to pierce through the screen, as if he were speaking not just to Emily, but to the millions watching. "I am not perfect, nor do I have all the right answers. But there is one thing I know for certain. The difference between a guardian of truth and an abuser of power is not in the power they hold, but in their willingness to accept scrutiny from others." He leaned forward, no longer with arrogance in his eyes, but with determination. "The day I refuse to be questioned, the day I use my power to silence those who disagree with me, that will be the day I become the very thing I have always feared." Silence blanketed the studio. No one could say a word. Emily, who had prepared for this moment for weeks, now felt as if her words had become futile pebbles. Musk was not defending himself, nor was he trying to diminish any doubts. His words were not an excuse but a serious warning, directed at himself and everyone listening. This was no longer a battle of wits between two individuals. This interview had transformed into a discussion about power and responsibility, about oversight and the limits that must not be crossed. Everyone present understood that they were not witnessing the end of a debate but the beginning of a conversation about the future that each of us would shape together. A heavy atmosphere spread throughout the studio, as if time had been suspended after Elon Musk's final words. Those words still echoed in the air, creating a weight that made it difficult for anyone to breathe evenly. Emily Roberts, the host known for her sharpness in tense interviews, now sat in silence, her hands clasped tightly together as if trying to steady herself. But it was not because she had failed, it was because she realized that this conversation was far from over. And perhaps, it would change the way we all perceive the world. She took a deep breath. Her once piercing gaze now softened, replaced by a clear sense of contemplation. She gently set her pen down on the table, then looked straight into the camera, where millions of eyes were waiting. "We have just experienced a rather extraordinary conversation tonight," Emily said, her voice steady yet carrying a thoughtful gentleness. "This was not just an ordinary interview, but a deep dialogue, one that perhaps we all need to reflect on." Her words echoed, freezing the air in the room. For those of you watching from all over, I want you to ask yourselves, are we truly living in a world full of information? But how much of it is the truth? And how much is just the narrative others want us to believe? Emily turned back to look at Elon Musk. Her gaze no longer rushed or competitive. "You have shared a lot, Elon, but the question I want to leave behind is not one for you, it's for all of us." She paused, letting the silence settle before continuing. "Are we actively seeking the truth? Or are we merely accepting what is placed in front of us? And are we willing to stand up and search for the truth? Or are we content with what is already there?" A wave of contemplation swept through the studio. Emily smiled gently, a smile filled with awareness, as if she had just uncovered something far more important. Tonight was not just a conversation, it was an invitation, she said, her eyes locked onto the camera, her words carrying a challenging undertone. An invitation for you to ask yourselves deeper questions about truth, about how we perceive this world, about how we must not just listen but actively seek understanding. Musk said nothing, only offering a slight smile. He stood up, adjusted his jacket, then turned back to Emily once more. Their eyes met in a silent moment of recognition, as if both had realized that this conversation had reached a different level. No longer a heated debate, but a quiet acknowledgement. Finally, Musk turned to the camera, his voice low and weighted, as if ensuring that his words would not end here. "I am not here to show you a single path. I am not asking you to agree with me, but I want you to think. When someone tells you something, ask yourself, do they truly want you to understand the truth? Or do they just want you to believe what they want? And most importantly, if someone tries to prevent you from hearing another perspective, Ask yourself why." He paused, his eyes unwavering at the camera. "Truth does not fear being questioned, only lies need to be hidden." No applause, no comments. Everyone in the room sat in silence, lost in their own thoughts. Elon Musk left, not as an ending, but as the beginning of something greater, a powerful message not just for Emily, but for everyone who was listening. Emily watched him leave, her eyes filled with understanding. Elon Musk stood up, and in the quiet stillness of the studio, each of his steps resonated deeply with the audience. As he left, the atmosphere remained heavy, as if there was still much left unsaid. The program did not end, not because it lacked a closing remark, but because something far more important had just begun to take root in the hearts of those watching. Emily Roberts remained seated, careful not to let the turmoil in her mind show. She had faced countless challenges before, but tonight, something was different. She took a deep breath, reminding herself to stay composed. After a long moment, she turned back to face the camera. Her eyes no longer reflected those of a neutral journalist but of someone holding a profound question in her hands. "We have just witnessed an encounter unlike what we expected," Emily began, her voice steady, as if affirming that this was no ordinary interview. "What we saw today may not have been just a broadcast. It was an invitation for each of us to confront the questions we have long ignored." She paused, allowing the silence to fill the space, as if giving everyone time to feel the weight of her words. "And the most important question does not come from me, but from you, the ones listening." She gazed gently at the audience, her eyes sharp yet contemplative. "We live in a world where we receive an overwhelming amount of information every day. But are we perceptive enough to distinguish what is true from what someone wants us to believe?" Emily continued, her words flowing smoothly like waves washing over the fleeting thoughts in each person's mind. "And more importantly, do we have the courage to ask ourselves deeper questions? Or do we simply accept what is presented to us without a trace of doubt?" Her eyes grew more intense as she turned back to the camera, making viewers feel as though they were facing the question directly. "I am not claiming that everything Elon Musk has shared is absolutely accurate." She smiled slightly, as if peeling back a layer of pretense. "But there is one thing I cannot ignore. His words are touching upon a truth we cannot simply dismiss." Emily remained silent for a moment, letting her words settle in the minds of her audience. She did not rush to continue but allowed the silence to become part of the message. "So, I want to pose this question to you, to those watching this program, and to everyone living in this world." She leaned slightly forward, her eyes locked onto the camera, her voice gentle yet unwavering. "Have you ever asked yourselves these questions? Are you willing to seek the truth on your own, instead of letting others decide it for you?" A long moment passed, the atmosphere thick with silence. And that question seemed to linger in the air. It was not just a question about an interview but an invitation for everyone to rise and reflect. Elon Musk did not respond immediately. He simply looked at Emily for a long moment, then smiled, a smile different from before. It was no longer a sign of victory but one of understanding, of sharing something far greater. He finally turned back to look into the camera lens. But this time, his voice was not rushed, not hurried like before. Each of his words resonated steadily, as if carrying a profound message. "I did not come here to tell you what to believe," he said, his tone calm yet firm. "I'm not asking you to agree with me. I just want you to think for yourselves." His words were like waves gently washing over the shore, soft yet unwavering. When someone tells you something, ask yourself, who is behind that story? What do they have to gain from it? And if someone tries to stop you from hearing another perspective, why is that? Because the truth never fears questioning, only lies need protection. With those words, Elon Musk slowly stood up, adjusted his collar, and left the room. He did not look back at Emily again, but as he walked past her, their eyes met, an unspoken acknowledgement, a silent understanding. The broadcast did not end because a conclusion had been reached, but because the question lingered in the minds of each viewer. This was no longer just a show, it was a challenge. A confrontation with the truth that each of us had to answer for ourselves. The screen gradually faded to black, but the voice still echoed. "If you think this conversation has ended, think again." A pause, just long enough to spark curiosity. Then the voice grew lower, more intimate, like a quiet confession. "Did what just happened make you think? Did it make you see the world from a different perspective? Let us know. Do you agree with Elon Musk's views? Or do you have a different perspective? I truly want to hear your thoughts. The voice was not forceful, not demanding, but an earnest invitation. If you found this story thought-provoking, hit like so it can reach more people. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications, because even deeper discussions are still waiting for you. A slight smile, unseen, yet felt in the tone. Thank you for taking the time to listen. Thank you for being here. See you in the next video. The screen closed, but the conversation continued in the comments. The lights in the studio gently dimmed. Emily Roberts remained seated, her eyes locked onto the camera lens, as if looking directly into the viewer's soul through the screen. The space fell into a brief silence before she spoke. What we just witnessed was not just an interview. She paused, as if giving her words time to sink into the listener's thoughts. It is a reminder that the world does not have just one point of view. She leaned forward, her voice lowering, carrying a deeper layer of meaning. We have become too accustomed to accepting things as they are presented, without asking, what is the real truth? A heavy silence enveloped the studio. Emily didn't need to say much, her sharp gaze conveyed enough weight. So I leave you with a question. She paused again, her eyes like a light shining directly into the viewer's awareness. When you leave this video, will you continue to follow what is laid out for you, believing in what has already been decided? She slowly inhaled, as if considering each word before speaking. Or will you start asking questions? Each word rang out like a bell, inviting the audience not only to listen but to reflect. Emily leaned back in her chair, her hands interlocked, the corner of her mouth slightly curling up, not out of satisfaction, but from realization. I don't expect you to believe in me. I don't expect you to believe in Elon Musk. Her voice was gentle, but with an invisible power, like a call to awakening. I just hope you learn to trust your own thoughts. A prolonged silence lingered, as if the universe itself was waiting for a response from the viewer. Emily lowered her gaze to the notepaper in front of her. The questions she had prepared for the whole evening suddenly didn't seem as important anymore. She looked up, facing the camera, and this time, her voice was both soft and firm. If what you heard today made you think, share your thoughts with us. Let us know, do you agree, disagree, or have a different perspective? She took a deep breath, then said the final words, simple yet filled with weight. Truth is not something someone brings and places in front of you. It is something you have to discover for yourself. The screen darkened, but this was not the end. For this conversation was not only about Elon Musk, nor was it just a discussion, it was also about you. About how you choose to perceive the world. Today's conversation might have ended, but the questions it leaves behind remain. Truth is not always obvious. And sometimes, what matters is not the answer, but whether you dare to ask the question. Life is not decided by what you hear, but by how you reflect on it. So, what do you think? Do you agree or have a different perspective? Share your thoughts in the comments, because you too are a part of this conversation. If you find this story thought-provoking, hit like so others can access it too. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications to not miss the next stories that might make you see the world differently. Pushpin note. This is a fictional story created for entertainment and to convey meaningful messages. Any resemblance to real events is purely coincidental. We hope this story not only gives you an entertaining moment but also sparks deep thoughts about life. Thank you for watching.